but we got a few town halls today that we're doing, and we just got back from DC last night, so just wanted to come out and have a conversation and talk to people and say hello and see how everybody's doing. And we got our friendly. Are you guys from Elford?
No.
No. So this is all part of the campaign season is upon us. So I would imagine, are you guys with any of the campaigns?
Yeah, we're with Nation and Always campaign.
Oh yeah. So that's all part of it. We do the same. It's all just a matter of just keeping track of everything that is said. So it's good. But so welcome. Thank you for joining. What are your names?
Thanks for having us.
My name's Karen.
Karen.
I'm David.
David. Okay. Are you from Ithaca or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Very good. We got up early and drove over.
Too early.
Too early. Yeah.
I wish you had it later in the afternoon.
Sometimes we get coffee at these things. Next time we'll get you coffee. That's not a problem. But anyway, so what's going on a little bit in DC, and then what we'll do is open it up to questions and conversations as to what's going on. We do these town halls all the time, and before we get started, we always say thank you to our host. Thank you so much for opening the town hall.
Appreciate you coming.
This is Memory Lane. I used to represent the town years ago, and it's a great community, and we love coming up here and always enjoy the parade. We got the parade coming up. Do you have the parade this year?
Yes, we do. The 11th.
June 11th?
No, August 11th.
August 11th.
Bicentennial.
Bicentennial.
I've had to write that down, John.
Yeah, there you go, Sharon. Sharon, write that down, see if we can come up to the parade. That's a good one. And we always have enough candy for everybody, so that's always fun. Just to highlight some people that we have with the staff, we have Sharon Murphy, who runs the district office, or not runs the district office. She's our right-hand person from Corning.
She runs the district. No, she runs it. I don't know what the heck I'm going on.
That's right. Joe Sempolinski was our district director, and is still our district director. And then there's Tim Colpe, who helps us out at the Corning office. So just to introduce you to some of the people that you would be working with. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have the office in Corning, we have one up north in the Pittsburgh, and we got Bowling, and Lee James works out of the Bowling office. So if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. Right now in Washington, what are we doing? Well, right now is we're getting into the heart of the appropriations process. That's the spending bills that we do on an annual basis. We've been trying to adhere to regular order in the House of Representatives. They haven't done it in many years, but we last year made a firm commitment when we took over to make sure that we go back and do regular order to come up with a budget. You notice in the House we've passed a budget last year and this year. Senate's going on 4 years, no budget. That's a problem. That's a fundamental, to me, it's a fundamental principle type of job that we need to do, is to have a budget to lay out exactly how we're going to go forward in America. And the fact that the Senate hasn't done one is very problematic and very frustrating, and still carry a lot of frustration down in Washington. Because my overall sense, and we're making some great headway over the 18 months that we've been there. When I first got there, we went down in that special election. There were still a lot of people that were like, this national debt, the $15.8 trillion that we're at now, you guys are just making it up. It's not a big deal. The economy will improve because it always improves. It's just kind of that attitude. And over 18 months, we're really getting to a spot where we all know what the problem is. I think people have come to the realization. There's still some who haven't, but the debt is a major problem. It's a drag on the economy. It's a drag on the jobs. It's a drag on the future of America. And we're really trying to have to come together to solve the problems. But the problem is that, we all know what the problem is, but the frustration is everyone is so tied up in politics right now down in Washington. We are dealing with a situation where, very frustrating to me, that all they're worried about is how does this impact November? And I think there's no better example of it than what I see coming out of the White House. We have been to the White House, we've been to it with the president a few times, and I knew we were in trouble back in the debt ceiling debate when we were over there for a meeting, and essentially the president pushed himself away from the table and said, "It's not my problem, guys." And I'm like, oh my gosh. We're talking about the debt ceiling, we're talking about potential default on our debt, we're talking about how are we going to get out of this hole, how are we going to get us on a path that's sustainable. And the president just kind of pushed himself away and said, not my problem, it's your problem. And that's our CEO, that's the leader, commander-in-chief. And, you know, and I knew he did that for the purposes of getting ready for the campaign cycle. And all he was focused on was the November election. And from that point forward, it seems like more and more people in D.C. are getting away from the table and saying, okay, nothing's really going to happen. We got elected, they have the attitude of, you know, we got elected for a year or 2 months. I got elected for 2 years. I try to push every day, push out new ideas, try to push out, you know, the solutions as to what we're going to do. But the sad news is that between now and November, probably not a lot is going to get done on the legislative front. But from November to January, I will tell you that tax-mageddon, that fiscal cliff that you may be reading about and hearing about, that is going to be a very hectic time in Washington because we have the tax rates that are coming up to an expiration. We have the sequestration, the $1.2 trillion worth of cuts going into effect in the beginning of January. You have unemployment, you have payroll, tax rates, you have how our doctors are paid under Medicare, all expiring. And there's 101, I sit on the Ways and Means Committee, which does all the tax policy, trade policy, and health policy of America. You got 101 tax extender provisions, which are provisions that expired last year or will expire at the end of this year of the code that people rely upon as they've done their tax planning. But because they're expiring, there's this uncertainty that is being created, not only with the tax extenders, but with the overall code and with all these policies that are expiring. So what that sets up is that there is not an interest, or there's not a person, or there's not a corporation, there's not a organization that will not be impacted by something that happens at the end of January or end of December, January 1, 2013. So it's going to bring everybody to Washington. So I'm trying to be a voice to say, hey, if everyone's going to be here, why don't we do what needs to be done? Let's talk about, you know, how are we going to grow this economy? How are we going to create jobs? How are we going to deal with the debt? How are we going to deal with the booming national debt and the entitlement problem we face in Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid? Because if we don't do those reforms, they're not going to be sustainable. So that's what's kind of going on in Washington right now. And, you know, we can go on and on and on, but I came here to talk and listen as to what's going on here in the district. And so I know we do the written questions.
We got a whole bunch. So hey, everybody hasn't had a chance to fly down myself or Sharon or Tim, and we'll get them in, and we'll try and get as many as we can.
And we have a smaller group, but we do the written questions because we found in the beginning that a lot of times we started just talking about one issue, and a lot of people travel from afar. And because we didn't do the written questions, we spent the whole time talking about the one issue. This allows us to talk about as many people, as many issues as possible, talk to as many people as possible. And then if we run out of time, because we have other town halls, we have a record to get back to you so that we can address the concern.
And once again, thank you to the town for hosting. Jim asks, the Ryan budget plan proposed rolling RR, I'm assuming that's railroad retirement, into Social Security. After 40 years working for the RR and taking time away from home, traveling, giving up a large part of being with family to earn a living, hoping one day to be able to retire, why would this be done to us? That's Jim's question.
Where's Jim? Yeah. So I know the proposal is to put it in the Social Security, and you guys have been treated differently for 40 years. You know, I think the concern that's coming up, and maybe explain to me a little bit more on what you...
Well, when you work for the railroad, you don't get Social Security pay into railroad retirement. It's a different fund. And it's a pretty good retirement plan. It's not, I don't know if I can call it a government plan. I guess it is. But I don't get the perks of retiring at 55, and I don't get the great medical programs. You know, like I say, I've worked for the railroad for 40 years on the tracks. I don't get to drive the engines. I do the physical labor. And I've been doing this for 40 years. I still can't retire for another year and a half. 41 and a half years old, manual labor. And now I'm hearing that to save $2 billion over 10 years, we're going to roll railroad retirement into Social Security and cut my pension, my monthly pension. I understand things have to be done, but now it's in my backyard.
And through the lean years, when he first started, we were raising a family. If he was laid off because he didn't want to go 300 miles away, his railroad retirement was what, $62.50
My
every other
unemployment
week?
was like $62.50 a week.
And when regular retirement...
How do you live on that?
Yeah, so.
So, you know, I sacrifice that, hoping that, you know, I'm gonna have a good pension when I retire. And now I'm starting to see that go away.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the exact details. I know the proposal was in there to move it over to Social Security, but I believe it's not for people. I thought, isn't it for new hires?
You know, I mean,
He can't get an answer.
I don't know.
Well, what we'll do, because this is why we like doing these town halls, because we'll get back to you with the details as to what the exact proposal is. And I think what you're going to see in the whole overall Ryan proposal and what Paul's trying to do is to make sure, like, members of Congress, there was a time when we weren't in Social Security, that was years ago. Now we contribute to Social Security, everything we do, our health care plans, and a lot of people believe that we get free health care from day one, and we get it for life. That's just not true. Those reforms happened years ago. So what you're seeing is Paul recognizing that Social Security needs to be reformed, Medicare needs to be reformed, and trying to treat everybody equally. And so that's kind of the gist of the underlying principle of the proposals that are coming out there. So on your specific question, let's see exactly what the details are, but I believe it's for new hires, but not 100%.
Well, usually anything you see from Ryan is, you know, 55 and younger.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so I'm being selfish. I'm going, okay, well, maybe it good. It won't affect me. But then I'm thinking about all the guys that we've
Yeah,
hired
30 years.
that have 30 years, you know,
Yeah.
and they've worked under the same assumption. And, you know, when I look back and I see that we spend $4 billion a day that we don't have, and then under this plan, he's going to save the taxpayer $2 billion over 10 years. I'm thinking, boy, there's more fish to fry than this. I just don't get it, why he would go after railroad retirement when $2 billion in 10 years? I mean, when we're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars that, you know, we have 100 different agencies doing the same thing. There's so many places to cut and to save money.
Yeah.
I just
No,
don't
and I
get it.
appreciate that sentiment, and I'm glad you brought it up, because one of the things that I've heard a lot during the town halls and what I've learned when I first got to DC and still learn every day is there's a sentiment that if we cut out all the waste, fraud, and abuse, and that we, as members of Congress, didn't get a salary, that the national debt, I've heard that statement so many times, that the national debt and the $1.3 trillion that we add to it every year would go away and it would be resolved. And I just can tell you, spending the amount of time that we have on these issues, that is not going to do it. Now, catching all the waste, fraud, and abuse is absolutely something we need to do. We need to do it. We've been spotlighting it every week. We put a spotlight on different programs. Last week we were looking at the TSA, millions of dollars in unnecessary equipment that they purchased and then they mothballed and put into a warehouse. You know, we uncovered the fact that we were building a sewer system in Tijuana, Mexico, that we canceled. That was $12 million. And you know, the biggest argument I got when we highlighted that and we actually canceled that project was, well, Tom, it's only $12 million. And I'm like, that's the problem. Only $12 million. That's the problem. And so, you know, definitely want to make sure that we're on the same page, that waste, fraud, and abuse in and of itself will not solve the problem. But your point is well taken. The other thing is, because of the size of the government that we're talking about, every nook and cranny needs to be looked at and needs to be reformed. And this is something that I hear a lot of, because a lot of people know, we got to strengthen the economy, we got to create jobs, we got to get this debt under control. And when we start talking about solutions, you start impacting people. And everyone starts coming in and they say, you know what? That's great. We need to solve the problem, but don't do it in my backyard, as you mentioned. And what we have to do, I think what we have to do as a nation is come together, not divide. Come together and say, okay, we're all going to be put in this together, and we're going to come together and solve it. And, making sure that everything is on the table and every nook and cranny is looked at. But when it comes to your specific situation, I think the concept that Paula does and that I agree with is the more that we can make sure that people that have relied on their retirement plans, that have come to the point in their life where they don't have enough time to readjust. I'm 40, so I have time to readjust maybe Social Security. I won't get it at 65. Maybe it'll be a little later when I get a little older. But I got a little more time to adjust for that. And that's, I think, is a reasonable and practical approach to it. And I think you're going to see in us, that type of approach to the problem. But let's just double check it. Let's look at the details and get you some more details. So
Yeah, because this is,
we're talking the same.
and then on the political side, this is hurting the Republicans. I mean, the unions have taken full advantage of this.
Yeah,
And believe me, people aren't paying attention, but then they get handed this and they go, oh my God, the Republicans are taking my...
yeah. And we get that, and we're going to get it. And I know, eyes wide open going into the campaign season. That's why I get so frustrated in Washington. Is that this is exactly the concern? Is that so many people don't want to do anything because it's going to impact us politically. And these problems that we're dealing with. I mean, this debt, this economy. I mean, the unemployment number just came out, 8.2% we went up to yesterday. The way to solve this problem is to get our spending under control, downsize our government, because we're spending $3.6 trillion, and grow the economy. Get that unemployment number down. And and we have in our office, and I think we handed off this sheet. I don't know. Did we hand it off?
Yep.
We run our office like a business, and in the issue of the job creation and the economy, these are the 4 points that we stress and that we work on every day. Controlling the debt, get a credible plan put together so we can ignite the confidence in America to invest in America again. Cut down the regulations. Not talking about no regulations, talking about reasonable regulations. Doing comprehensive tax reform so that we have a competitive tax code that allows us to compete on the world stage, and also is 70,000 pages of tax code. It's just asinine. That's the copy of it there. It's completely irrational. And so we are in full support of simplifying it and making that code much more competitive. And then the other issue that we always focus on is a comprehensive energy policy. Because if we're going to build things in America again, if we're going to grow the industrial base again, you're going to need that power to do it. And so what we got to do, in my opinion, we focus all day on those. We downsize the government, we grow the government, or we grow the economy. That's going to do a lot to take care of these issues. Because the other thing that we know we're going to be facing in this upcoming election, we've already heard a lot of it. The other solution on the other side is, if you just tax the top 2%, if you just raise the taxes on the top 2%, or that everyone pays their fair share of the 1%, that doesn't work. That's just not being honest. That's political. That's all political. That's not working based on the policy that makes sense. Because if you raise taxes on the top 2%, just so everyone's on the same page, it goes along with the waste, fraud, and abuse issue, you're talking $70 billion that you're going to raise in cash. That's just a static score. That's not a dynamic score. That's not getting into the issue of raising taxes hurts the economy, therefore you're going to depress the economy, and the economy is not going to be as strong, and therefore you're going to have additional impacts. Just $70 billion a year. You got a $1.3 trillion problem that we're creating. It's a structural problem. So, we're trying to be honest as we go into this election season. We're trying to be upfront with people and saying, look, these are real problems. And we got to have a policy-based debate, not a political-based debate. And I appreciate the fact that, you know, it's going to hurt Republicans and all that, and I hear it, but it's not why I went to Washington. Why I went to Washington is to solve this problem, grow this economy, create jobs, so that that little one there, my 11 and 13-year-old at home, we can hand off the country and be confident that's in a better condition than which we found it now. Rather than for the first time ever, I'm hearing people talk about how they're enjoying an America when they pass it off to their kids that's not going to be as good as in which they found it. That's not the American way. So, let's keep moving.
All right. An issue that comes up, I think, at every town hall meeting. Gary asks, why don't they stop dragging their feet and start giving out natural gas drilling permits?
Where's Gary? There we go. Yeah. Well, you know, in New York, we're coming to the end in the regulatory review process that they're doing in the DEC. And I think you know our position on natural gas has been, you know, we can do this, need to do this safely, responsibly, and we need to move forward with it. Because the shale gas, and the one thing we also have to look at is the big picture of this issue. A lot of guys look at it from the Marcellus Shale, and we started the Marcellus Shale Caucus in Washington. It's a bipartisan caucus, 21 members, to really come at this issue by getting the best science and data out there in the public debate. And we found that to be very effective. But, you know, as we go forward, you know, it's not just Marcellus. It's Utica, it's Vulcan, it's Eagleford, it's all the tight sand, oil and gas that we have available to us in domestic sources here in America. Because that power source is not only an economic opportunity in regards to the natural gas coming out and the jobs that it will create and what that will do there. It's also that power source for that manufacturing industrial base going forward that's going to put a lot of people to work for generations to come. And then, couple on top of that, if you get into the transportation fuel side of it, where compressed natural gas and the other fossil fuels that we have here domestically become an alternative fuel to gasoline, now you're talking true national security implications. And I am for policies that are going to get us off dependency of oil and sending our men and women over to areas in the world that put them in harm's way just for the sake of oil issues. And that's, you know, I think I share your sentiment, and I think New York State's coming to the final stage of its review and regulatory oversight. Is there anything else, an answer for you?
We're farmers and pay big property taxes, and we wouldn't mind paying these taxes if we could get, you know, do something with the gas. We'd have an income to pay these taxes, and it's adding in the taxes we're paying, and we have, I guess you want to say, gold mines under the ground here, and we can't do anything with them. And, you know, New York is like the only state. How many states have natural gas that they're drilling now? I don't know. It's like 25 or 30.
More.
And, you know, what's wrong with New York? What, we got some kind of different people here? Different structure of ground? You know, I don't understand it. You got a few people, environmental people, controlling our rights. And, you know, I just don't see it.
It's a fair point. And, you know, when you look at, you know, I got a good friend, Rick Berg. He's a member, sits next to me on the Ways and Means Committee. He's from North Dakota. And you see North Dakota at 3% unemployment. You see North Dakota, you see the workers at Taco Bell are getting $18 an hour for their wage. I mean, those are good, high-paying jobs that are being created out there. And it's also providing that power source that's going to fuel America. Now, I am all for a comprehensive energy policy. That's all the above, everything. Because I recognize that natural gas, oil, it's a finite resource. So we got to have that vision, and that's one of the things we work on. We spend a lot of time in coming up with a comprehensive energy policy that recognizes that short and midterm, you got to be honest, you got to be a realist, you got to be practical, that fossil fuels are going to be part of our operation and our economy and our way of life But the long term, got to keep a vision out there for what is the next alternative fuel? What is the next power source? And wind, solar, we've been supportive of all of them. They're not going to be the one solution, either one of them, but they're part of the solution to energy independence. We got stuff going on in our district. Up at University of Rochester, I toured a laser lab where they got laser fusion, and I read a report where they're in partnership with Livermore, and they're coming up with a prototype generation facility on laser fusion. That's not nuclear fission, that's nuclear fusion. That's a whole different kit and caboodle. That's a game changer. But until you get there, we got to be practical and realistic, and recognize there's landowner rights too in this conversation that need to be respected. And so I think you'll see in us a very common sense, practical approach to it when it comes to that natural gas opportunity that we have here in our backyard. And that is also why I am a 10th Amendment believer. I believe in the 10th Amendment. The government that's closest to the people governs best. And that's the people, the local governments, that's the people at the state governments, the people at the county governments. Those are the people that are in a best position to understand the uniqueness of the area. In New York, you mentioned that, do we have something unique here? There are certain areas in New York that are unique. You got the Finger Lakes, you got the New York City situation, you got Skinny Atlas, and the DC has recognized those situations in Skinny Atlas in New York City, and by saying those watersheds are going to be off the table. Potentially the Finger Lakes is something to explore, and we've talked about that as an area that needs special type of oversight. But if you let a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. decide, and this is what's frustrating to me, a lot of people say, well, we want the EPA to regulate this and to be the oversight agency on it. And I say, be careful when you ask for that. Because if you remember the telecommunications history of how these towers went up, and you read the 1996 Telecommunications Tower Act, or Telecommunications Act, you can see where the federal government said, they're assuming the federal government's going to go, no. And when President Obama in the State of the Union says that natural gas, shale gas, is a safe domestic source of energy, that's going to be a very heavy lift to get the Obama administration and the EPA to go from where they assume it's going to come down and say no to natural gas development. They're going to go all in, potentially, and say we're going to preempt local rules. And that's what they did under the Telecommunications Act, where you have no local control over where these towers go and where they're sited. Very limited control. And that's the problem when you get a one-size-fits-all attitude where people want to advance coming out of Washington. We don't, that attitude is not who I am, and I don't believe that's best for the country long term.
Charles asks, agencies are overly aggressive in issuing new regulations. FMCSA, which I believe is the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. In particular, they seem to think their only purpose is to tighten regulations, justified or not. FMCSA examples: electronic cogs, Mexican border, cross-border trucks, locks.
Electronic locks.
Oh, okay, locks. That makes more sense than cogs. Fair enough. Those darn electronic cogs are a real problem. I'm sure many agencies, EPA for example, do the same in other industries.
Yeah, we've talked about this.
We did
Please.
talk about this, and electronic logs is something that's right on the table right now in the transportation bill between the Senate and the House version. But it's also things where, like the electronic logs, they keep pushing, even though courts have told them that even on the limited use, where they're going to require for people who had serious safety problems, that they weren't addressing some of the issues that Congress had in the past told them to address about driver harassment, where companies could say, oh, you still got another hour to work today, keep working, keep going. And but they continue to push for more when they haven't even resolved the problems. Courts are telling them, you got to fix this first. But they keep pushing more. They're bringing out proposals now to put electronic stability controls on big trucks. Cost figures that I've seen say it's going to be a couple $1,000 per every new truck. 5 years at the rate they sell trucks, that's a couple of $1 billion. And more cost just to do business. you have, it seems like both under the Bush administration and the Obama administration, the push to bring Mexican trucks into this country has been very big.
Yeah.
Congress told the Bush administration, stop. Obama administration brought it right back. And while they have rules that say even the guys that are coming in got to work on a very limited oversight basis, high oversight basis for, say, 3 years. Well, they say, well, gee, we'll start a new program. Well, we'll give them credit for any time they were in before. And they don't look at, even though they had safety problems before, companies in 3 months, they've already got authority to run anywhere in the country. And then our government is paying for electronic recorders to go in Mexican trucks. They won't pay them, even if they require them in American trucks. That'll be on the American truckers to put them in. Our government is paying for exhaust pollution retrofit stuff for Mexican trucks operating in Mexico near the American border. We're paying to put that stuff in.
Well,
But the American
this
truckers
is why we do
need-
this town hall.
has
So
to do
I
this.
appreciate you bringing, I'm not aware of
Yeah.
that. So what we'll do is we'll definitely go back to DC, and that's
There's
like
a lot of that.
when we uncovered the building the sewer in Tijuana, Mexico that we were talking about earlier. Why are we doing that when we got the problems we got here in America? So I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and
and
we'll bring that
not
back.
only are we allowing this to happen, even though
We're providing resources.
we're supposedly under NAFTA, if you do allow Mexican trucks and Canadian trucks to operate cross-border, everybody's supposed to have basically the same safety requirements, the same
Yeah, that's,
work. Canadians do. Canadians and Americans, we cross-border all the time. Lots of Canadian trucks come to the US, lots of American trucks go to Canada. But we're working on a level playing field. The Mexican system, they're not up on the safety stuff.
we'll have to bring that up. We'll want to
And
enforce
yet
that.
they run all over.
Well, and I know that.
And then you even get state agencies like California Air Resources. Well, they pass rules, that impacts
All of it.
any of your long-haul trucking. Right now, my company, we run 50-something trucks over the road. I don't think we have a truck that can go into the Port of Long Beach, California, because of their rules. And they're hard to understand. You can run this year's trucks at this regulated, that year's truck at that. Your truck that was legal last year won't be next year. And it forces, again, if you want to do business there, you've got to go out and buy brand new equipment, high cost. You can't keep your old stuff going. And it's, to me, that's wasteful. I think you look even most dairy farms around, they keep their old equipment going.
This example, your experience, your
It's just
story
going amok.
is exactly what we're trying to fight in Washington, because these regulations are impacting you as a business guy,
Right.
as someone who's hauling product. The costs that are associated with hauling that product are borne by all of us. It impacts jobs, it impacts the economy,
Yeah.
and it's all, and that's one of the things I get frustrated with in Washington, is these guys, they come up with a rule, a regulation, and they say, okay, I want to decrease emissions to get clean air. We all want clean air. Everyone wants clean water, everyone wants clean air. But all they're looking at is, well, you told us to get clean air, so we're giving you a regulation that's going to control emissions. And they don't do the analysis of, well, what does that cost? And what does that impact all the way through? And how much of a return are we going to get for that decrease in emissions? And that's the cost-benefit analysis that we support and we talk about all the time when we talk about regulatory reform. Cutting these excessive regulations and really trying to put a spotlight on the stuff that doesn't make sense.
And then, like, the pollution was, well, okay, we passed that regulation, everybody complied with it, now we gotta come out with a new one.
Another one, yeah.
And another one,
Yeah.
and another one.
And we're seeing that
And
like
I'm
we...
sure every industry
Right.
is impacted that way. By
And we just saw it in the debate that came up with what they call cement MAC and boiler MAC. These are regulations that were coming out of the EPA that talk about the maximum achievable control technology, I believe is what MAC stands for. There's so many acronyms in Washington, D.C., it's another frustration I have. But boiler and cement MAC. And what they're talking about is they are actually trying to reduce their impacts on emissions, on air levels and discharges. And maximum achievable control technology, they're trying to reduce to a standard that they actually don't even have the technology to measure whether or not they achieve it. So essentially what happens is we've accomplished a lot from where we were in the 60s and the 70s, and that's good. And we're at the point now where if you get rid of 90% of the offending behavior or the offending emission, you're down to that last piece. And to get to that additional 10% or 1% of the remaining 10% is billions of dollars. And there's no recognition for the cleanup that we've already done. And to go that extra distance is something that we need to have an honest debate in America. But the agencies are looking at it and say, look, you want to get to a zero level. And I don't know anything in life that's really a zero level. Everything we do has some sort of impact. So that's the philosophy in Washington that we disagree with. And that we try to always highlight and say, okay, you want to get to that next level, but what are the true impacts? Have you done a cost-benefit analysis? And give us a true one, not one that's just been cooked or one that's been pieced together on a computer software program. Tell us actually why you're projecting what you're projecting. And so I appreciate you bringing it to our attention, and we're continuing to work on other issues like the clearinghouses for the drug testing and the security clearances. That was another thing. I think we talked about the security clearances at a previous meeting where you guys have multiple different agencies, a couple $100 a pop for 6, 7 different certificates that you need, and why we don't have one-stop shops, clearinghouses in the government makes no sense to me.
Or they require you to jump through all the hoops and then they don't put up the equipment to use them.
Yeah. But that's why we appreciate bringing it to our attention, and we'll see what we can do. And on this issue, we'll go back to DC and figure it out what we're doing with Mexico and how we're paying for their Mexico trucks that we should be doing. They should be forced and played on the same field we're playing on.
All right, we have a question. It's just a reference to a bill number and then rationale, HR 1386. And I did do, that's why I was on my phone a little bit ago. It was, it's the Alzheimer's bill. We had a meeting about it.
Bill is part of the Medicare modification. My question to you haven't, or to my understanding, you haven't supported the bill, and my question, why?
I don't know the...
We had a meeting on this. It increases access to Medicare for those who are Alzheimer's patients. And it allows them to get into the system in an easier fashion based on their diagnosis.
Well...
May I interject one thing?
Sure, please.
You had shown a great deal of compassion at the neighborhood college, and you yourself stated you have experience within the family. So
Absolutely. Yeah, and when it's an area that we spent some time on, Alzheimer's. We had that meeting up at Nazareth. We've had type 1 diabetes, cancer, the whole dynamic. And as to why we're not on that bill, I don't have an answer for you today. Let me take it back and run it. We have a process in the office that we go. It's based off of what Amo did. Amo's a good friend, and he's taught me a lot over the years. And one of the things he taught me when I first got down there, as you can imagine, there's thousands of bills that are dropped. And some of the bills get a lot of attention. Other bills do not. And a lot of people will come in and say, here's a 2-page bill. It's very simple. And it's Alzheimer's, for example. And I'm just using it as an example. And who's going to be against Alzheimer's? Who's going to be against curing cancer? Just co-sponsor it. And as Amo and I talk, you got to be very careful. You can do the political thing and shoot from the hip and tell people what they want to hear right to their face, right then and there. Or you can have a process, and you can make sure that you're looking at all the unintended consequences, making sure you're truly vetting and reading the bill before you actually put your name on the bill. So we have that process, and why that hasn't gotten into that process, I'm not sure. But what we'll do is we will take this back, and we will pull that bill, and we'll run it through that process. And I can't imagine there being any red flag that's going to come up other than a cost. I don't know what the cost, what it's Do you have any idea what the costs are associated with it?
They said 2% that it might pass because of the political person that had introduced it.
Who was the person who introduced it?
I have a paper here.
Do you have the paper? Yeah, maybe. Let's see who it is, because that also is something that can be a problem. They just, some members just, they don't do the work.
Why don't you keep it? I didn't
Oh, okay.
I didn't want to delay other questions.
Okay, Mr. Markey. You got bipartisan support on it, so I can't imagine, that's not too bad. I appreciate it, and we will definitely take it back, and, you know, we're supportive of, that disease is a terrible disease. And
Tom, I got a question. What difference does it make if you co-sponsor it or not? I mean, it shouldn't, the only thing really matters is whether or not you vote yes or no for it. Is there a big implication if you co-sponsor something or not?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. Ultimately, the yes and no is the most important thing, and actually getting it to the floor and getting it voted upon is a bigger issue and a very practical point to raise. The co-sponsorships are important though, because the more co-sponsors you get on a bill, the more people will look at it and say, oh, this is something that is more of a priority. And as we said, there's thousands of bills that get dropped, thousands of issues that get dropped. So the more people that you can get on a issue to highlight the issue, the more likelihood that you'll get to the floor through the committee process and actually go the distance of actually potentially coming into a law. Very few bills become law. And that's, so, you know, that's, hope I answered your question, but that's one of the big issues that people try to do. And we also want to stand with people, you know, we're there to take positions. You know, we're not a guy who's gone down there to not take positions. There's some guys who like to vote present a lot. It's yellow. When you vote present, it's a yellow button on the thing. I want to tell people where we stand on issues and where we are. And when I take those stands, they're sincere. I mean, we've done the work, we've done the research, and we're going to stand on them. And that's what. So when we put our name onto it.
Is that a green button, you mean?
Yes is a green button. It is.
No is
And A is red. Yeah, and A is red. So you never want to vote yellow. That's what I was saying. The reason it's there is if you have a true conflict, it gives you the ability, you know, if there's a true conflict of interest that you may have with a bill, then you vote present. But we haven't voted present on any bill. Double checking all of my mental count.
Not a single one, no.
Not a single one. Yeah, we take a position.
We're not yellow.
We're not yellow.
One final written question.
Okay, then we'll open it up.
Tom, sort of a multi-part one. One,
There's no-
there we go. Increase tax ratio on millionaires and large businesses. Don't increase the interest rate on higher education student Stafford loans. And protect the Social Security system.
All right.
Broad fiscal plan.
So who's the question from? Right there, okay. Well, let's take, maybe take one in the middle first. Student loan interest. Why this is becoming an issue, I have no idea. I have yet to find a member in Washington, D.C. who is opposed to making sure that the interest rates don't go up on July 1st. And so we'll do whatever we can to support any legislation that comes out to make sure that doesn't happen. The problem is going back to the political point that's made. We're in a campaign season, so people are looking to make issues. And what I say to people, I say, why are we making an issue out of this? Because you got millions of people that are paying student loans back. Why are you going to put them in harm's way because of a political debate that you want to start across America? Now, there is the question of how you pay for it. That's a legitimate question that we always will bring to the table, because the attitude of we don't have to worry about paying for it has gotten us into this national debt crisis here. So we always ask that question. You know, how are you going to cover it? How are you going to pay for it? And there are so many different programs, as you pointed out. The waste, fraud, and abuse area. This is where the waste, fraud, and abuse stuff can come in very handy. Is to take something that's wasteful and pair it up with something like student loan interest, and say use that wasteful program, end it, and pay for the student loan interest. And that's what we need to do. And so we're open to all alternatives on all offsets, on making sure we pay for it. And I'm pretty confident that those rates aren't going to go up. There's a lot of blustering going on now. There's a lot of political gamemanship. The tax question, raising questions on the, what was it, the 1%? Okay. You know, I get this question a lot. And if I could ask you a question back, what do you think, do you think that will solve the problem if we raise the
No,
tax?
you mentioned, okay, it's only gonna bring in billions of dollars. Well, you also mentioned 12 million in Mexico that we were wasting. What's 12 million?
Yeah.
Well, over 1 year, what's billions that would help if it was just a 1 year tax?
Yeah.
'Cause that's gotta help.
Well, and this is where I think we're talking the same language, believe it or not. This is where reforming that code will get us to where you want to get to and where I want to get to. Is making sure that 70,000 pages, there are loopholes in there, there are special interest exceptions. We need to look at every single one of them and wipe them out. And we're committed to
loopholes, we probably
What's that?
have a lot of problems corrected. I'm from higher ed. I spent 35 years instructing at a college.
Yeah.
And, I see where they're we have cut in New York State over $400 million in support of higher ed. Raised tuition, and we're killing ourselves. If you don't have higher ed, if you don't have educated people, what are you going to run on?
I wholeheartedly agree. We've been very supportive of those programs and the STEM programs. It's another thing where we kind of break from our party on. We're very supportive of that. But getting to the issue that you're referring to, you're going to see, I say in July, this is just my personal speculation, I've been an advocate of this lame duck session, doing comprehensive tax reform in the lame duck session between November and January. Reason why is because all of the code is expiring. So if it's going to expire, why don't we take care of it long term? Not come up with another 2-year, when President Obama did the extensions for 2 years. What are we going to do? Another 12-month, 2-year type of Band-Aid to the code? It's an opportunity, and it should be seized. So we'll continue to be a supporter of that. We'll be a voice for that, and we'll continue to push forward. At a minimum, if that doesn't happen, and there's a lot of people in D.C. saying, Tom, there's just not enough time. We don't know what's going to happen in the presidential election. And if you read, I don't know if you ever read The Showdown at Gucci Gulch. It was a book that we just finished reading. It's about the 1986 tax reform process. And in 1986, you had the White House, you had the Senate, and you had the House fully engaged in the issue of tax reform. And it still took 2 years to do it. And so a lot of guys tell me, well, when you read that book and when I read the book, it's going to take a little bit of time to do the comprehensive tax reform. So, I'm the freshman, I'm the new guy, I'm eager beaver, want to do it sooner than later, and they appreciate it, but they're also giving me a dose of reality saying, until we see what happens in the White House, presidential politics, who's at the helm, see what happens in the Senate, and then we fully engage it, you're probably not going to see it done in the lame duck session. But the good news is that what you're going to see probably in July, in my personal opinion, is you're going to see a marker put out there in the House saying, we're going to do comprehensive tax reform. And it's no longer a question of if we're going to do it, it's a question of when are we going to do it. And I think you're going to see an expression from the House say, 2013, we have to do it, that's the deadline. And there'll be mechanisms that we'll try to put into law that make it spring up and force it to occur. Kind of like what they did with the Budget Control Act, kind of what they do with trade agreements with fast track under TA and those provisions. But it's into the weeds of DC, and I hate getting into those weeds because it's tough to have their language match up with our language. But so putting those mechanisms in place to push it along. And I think 2013 is a very viable process that could occur. And I think that's going to take care of a lot of this inequity in the code. And we support it. We support that comprehensive tax reform. It needs to be cleaned up. And what was the last point on Social Security? Strengthening Social Security. That is, one of the things that I hope people appreciate about what Paul Ryan has done and what people will see that we've done in the House. For the last 2 years, we passed a budget and we touched these third rails of politics. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. These are things political advisors, even to today, tell us don't talk about Medicare, don't talk about Social Security, because they're the third rail of politics and it will destroy you politically, blah, blah, blah. You know what, I'm part of a freshman class to a T that that we all have gone down there to fix the problems. And if anybody wants to say Social Security and Medicare doesn't have a problem, I'll just tell you, they're not being honest with you. If you just read the trustees report, the trustees report just came out a few weeks ago, and read the last 4 before that, and there's no doubt, like we've read, there's no doubt these programs are in trouble, and they need to be saved. They need to be reformed, and they need to be strengthened. So how do you do that? You put it out into the public for debate. You may not like Paul Ryan's proposals. You may not like the premium support proposal he has for Medicare, for example. But at least it's a proposal, and it's in black and white. And hopefully, by doing what we're doing in the House, we're going to get this campaign season, one of the positives of this campaign season, I hope, will be that you'll get concrete proposals from both sides as to how they're going to solve the problems with Medicare and Social Security. And that's where, we're still waiting. Senate hasn't passed the budget.
We're waiting, great.
The White House, the White House budget, the president's budget, it's the only thing, I was amazed, it's the only thing that's gone through the House and Senate on a unanimous decision. Every senator, every House of Representative member voted against the president's budget. That tells you what a weak document and lack of leadership that's being demonstrated in the White House, in my opinion, and I think many colleagues share that when they put their no vote up on the president's budget. So that being said, we gotta talk about reforms. We gotta push the debate, and I think we're at the point. And you know what? If it turns into a race like we saw in the 26th congressional district, with Kathy Hochul, and where they were taking a guy who looked like Paul Ryan, and they took grandma in a wheelchair and threw her off the Niagara Gorge. I don't know if you saw that ad. That was the ad that was run against the Republican candidate. And we want to somehow go with that. Our mission in Washington, D.C. was to go to Washington, D.C. to take our grandparents and throw them off cliffs into gorges. If that's the extent of our political debate in America, we're in a real bad spot. We're in a real bad spot. And I hope it elevates from there. And we'll continue to push it as we move forward.
All right, we have
a couple more
questions come in, and 2 of them are sort of 2 sides of the hydrofracking question.
Okay.
Garner says, what type of impact will the natural gas drilling have concerning our local economy, so the economic benefits? Then Angela's concerns are more environmental. Clean water is our most precious natural resource. I would rather be poor and healthy than wealthy and sick from contamination. A guy in PA was arrested for dumping 18 gallons of used fracking fluid, and all he was sentenced to was 2 weeks in jail and a $1,000 fine. What are we going to do to improve monitoring and offer better protections before we approve any drilling permits?
Okay, so the economic, we'll take the economic question. The economic, they're direct. We're already seeing it in the southern tier counties of the district with the spillover effect from the northern tier of Pennsylvania. There's guys getting CDL licenses. I got welders that have come up to me and told me how they're going to northern tier of Pennsylvania. And the one issue I have, and these are the serious issues that we should be talking about, is the potential impacts of natural gas development. Like Nucor, they have the steel factory down in Chemung County, and they're losing welders because the welders, there's no vocational training where welders are coming up, and the job is being promoted. And so what happens is they're losing welders to the northern tier of Pennsylvania because they can make more money down there. And they're looking at a $60,000 to $70,000 job as a welder at Nucor that they're having a real hard time filling. That's a good job, $60,000 to $70,000 a year. That puts a lot of food on the table and many roofs over people's heads, and will take care of families for generations to come. And so those are some problems we got to recognize in that. I don't want to sacrifice one industry for another industry. I want to see both. And that's why we've reached out to the community colleges. We've been proactive trying to develop vocational training programs. We've been supportive of them.
There is a welding program in Wellsville. I started it, and it's a 2-year degree program. Excellent program.
Yeah, and so we need to promote those types of things. And I know John Anderson over at Elford State has been a big advocate of it. We've been working with some other entities to Corning Community College to have that coming out of from high school all the way up through. And these are good jobs, these are great skills, and because we're seeing it across America on the vocational side. But the economic impacts are, I think, significant. And it's not just from it's not just the development of the resource. You got the secondary, the hotels, the restaurants, and everyone's really familiar with that. But when you sit down, when I've sat down with guys like John Surma, he's the CEO of U.S. Steel, Dan D'Amica, the CEO of Nucor, and they start talking to me about, we want to build steel factories again in America. They want to make a $100 billion investment in America because they're getting ripped off in China, they're getting ripped off in India, and they're chasing that labor differential by going over there. But that labor differential is getting closer and closer. It's not as much as it was. They want to come back to America because of the rule of law, the competitiveness that we offer, the workforce that we have here in America. All the barriers of language, all the barriers of logistics, of transportation are removed. And we got a strong work ethic in America. And they want to tap into that. And so that's the power source that are going to power these facilities going forward. So very, very, very much interested in it. On the environmental issues, who raised the environmental concerns? Okay. You're concerned about the aquifer impacts?
I'm definitely concerned about
Yeah.
that. I'm concerned about actually all of it. I'm concerned about the fact that it takes 1 million gallons of water to do one well. I'm concerned about the fact that it takes like 10,000 trucks to go fill a well. It's all issues that have not really been suitably addressed to satisfy my concerns.
And the chemicals, I think.
The chemicals, the disclosures. You know, a couple good things. I mean, there's a lot of information out there, and I would encourage you to, we can provide you with a slew of information reports if you're interested in any of them, from the various entities, be it public entities, universities, that we have read. And the Marcellus Shale Caucus, if you go to the website, type in Marcellus Shale Caucus, there are some hearings and testimonies that we've had that may be beneficial to get to the issues of what is the science and what is the data behind it. The good news on the disclosure of the chemicals and the chemical disclosures, I don't think you're going to see any regulations in New York or any, we've had let me back up, in the caucus, we had a hearing by a group called Stronger. It's a combination of state agencies, industry reps, leading environmental group reps, and what they do is they come around and they look at existing state regulations, proposed regulations, and they say, what are the best practices, what are the issues, and how do we best oversee them? And one of the things that they've come to the conclusion, and that's why I'm pretty comfortable in saying that any regulations going forward, or even older regulations, are going to get changed to disclose what's in the fluid. There's a lot of misinformation that they won't disclose the fracking fluids, the makeups of them. There's a lot of voluntary disclosure that's going on now. New York State, I don't think any regulations coming out of New York State will have anything that doesn't have them disclosing what's used in the fracking fluid. What you may not get is the levels. It's like a Coke can. You know what's in Coke, a Coca-Cola can, but you don't know how much sugar, how much carbonated water, and all that. But they will definitely disclose it, and I see that going forward. But I believe that with local and state oversight, this can be done safely and responsibly. And because of all the economic impacts, the jobs that are going to be created, both with the development of the resource and the long-term jobs with the power source, and the impacts that it has on transportation fuel potentially, we got true national security implications that will be addressed through it. I think it's part of that short-term, mid-term plan that needs to be part of that comprehensive energy policy moving forward.
So you're figuring that the state and local agencies are going to be doing the monitoring.
I do, and I believe, and that's one thing we're working with our state officials.
You're saying that if somebody comes into if a gas company comes into Canisteo and they start fracking, it's going to be up to the local community and the state. But
State DC primarily.
The state right now doesn't have proper funding for it.
See, now this is a good question.
The state DEC, the New York State DEC, is by far in the entire country the most strict. They're probably, as far as environmental concerns, they're probably the best in the whole country at dealing with this. In fact, they overstep the EPA on some stuff. Some stuff the EPA says is okay, the DEC even says, no, we want to take another look at. And as far as funding, they have more funding than any other environmental agency in the country, bar the EPA. They do more with protecting and looking out for New York State property than any other state agency, environmental agency in the country. And not only has fracking, can it be done, it has been done for years. And as far as the economic stuff, Tioga County's unemployment is 5.4%. Steuben County, Chemung, that's up over 9. McKean and Potter County, the unemployment is so much lower than New York State. And as soon as they started drilling for natural gas, it was up at like $13, and now it's down to $2. So right there, we're all getting cheaper natural gas. Which the same thing would happen with oil. If we started drilling more of that, we wouldn't be paying $3.80 a gallon. So the environmental concerns, I understand. I own a farm, and the last thing I'm going to do is allow my farmland to be passed on to my kids to be ruined. I don't think any property owner is going to allow that. I know the whole water thing, but I don't think there's anything to suggest that we're going to damage our entire water supply or our whole environment. There's just so much that the DEC does, and I guess we can give them credit for that because they do so much that they check every single thing we do. It's unbelievable.
Well, and the issue on the state funding, and this is where we worked with, we have a great approach, I think, in our opinion. We work with our local officials, we work with our state senators and our state assemblymen on a regular basis, and that was one of the concerns I had, is to make sure that the state has appropriate revenue lines to make sure that they have the appropriate ability to oversee the permits and the activities. And what they need to do, and what they are telling me they're looking to do, in the final regulations that come out, the money that comes from the permits won't go into kind of the general fund abyss, if you would. It would be going to the DEC to make sure that they have the resources to hire enough people to oversee the development of the resource. To me, that is something we got to be definitely all watching because we know the fiscal problems that Albany faces as well as Washington, and we want to make sure that this resource is developed. Those resources don't go to other projects, and that's where it needs to be going to.
Can I answer the part you said about the towns? Towns, and I'm a planning board of the town of Howard, we are all looking at the impacts. So the part of the town is not the environmental, but we have road use agreements, we're looking at the man camps and like that. So your question about the towns, and I appreciate that Tom is saying that the local need to have control of that, not from Albany or from Washington. We have a land use agreement, and we've looked at the issues that the town can control without, restricting landowners' rights. But things like the road use agreement, which is sponsored through the county with a boilerplate that all the towns can use, and that's what the towns are going to do as far as regulating that. If that answers some of your questions.
And those are the impacts, and that's what I was trying to get to at the local level, because you're going to have traffic patterns that are coming through that the town, at the local planning board and town board levels are going to be more in tune with than they will be up in Albany or in Washington. And that's where I think that's the best of the government closest to the people governs best. And these guys know the roads, and that's where in Chemung County, I give Tom Cintulli a lot of credit. He's going out right now and mapping out all of the county roads and the county infrastructure, and so that you don't have the argument and the issue that potentially could come up and say, well, you came down this road and you destroyed it, we want you, oil and gas company, to fix the road. And they say, well, it was already destroyed. They're not going to have that ability. These guys are being proactive, but most of the counties in New York are reaching out. Tom's a good example of it, of doing that groundwork beforehand, so that you have a clear picture of what everything was before, what it was afterwards, and when they come in, there's a well thought out overall plan where they're working together and make sure it's mitigated. But I understand the concern. I just encourage more information about it.
One last question. Anita says, I believe that Made in America should mean more than foreign companies owning a building in America, where they can bring in foreign workers to take the jobs and then call it Made in America. Why can't Americans who live here have the full-time jobs that can support their families?
Yeah, where's it? Oh, she stepped outside. The Made in America, you know, there's some people, I'm kidding. The political answer is yes, we want everything made in America. And you know what? We're gonna, in Washington D.C., say we're all gonna be making it in America. We're gonna put up these walls around America, and we're not gonna import anything. It's just not the real world. The real world is we're in a world economy, and what is gonna make us get to the point where it's made in America again is when we make America strong again. And that is these 4 points. That's why I keep going back to this. This is our mission statement. If we make America deal with its debt, if we make America deal with this regulation problem that's coming out of Washington, we make America deal with its tax code that is completely unfair and needs to be reformed and be competitive on the world stage. If we give the power for America industry and America residents, you know, that's going to make us competitive. And just as those CEOs were talking to me about, you know, making those investments in America, really, the whole sum and substance of that conversation was, whatever the rules are, tell us what those rules are. Don't change them every 5 years. Don't change them. Don't have a tax code that's on a 12-month, you know, temporary extension. Don't have a highway bill that's on 30 days. Just tell us what the rules are, and you give us that certainty, and they'll invest in America. Because they are finding, as you go around the world, I mean, I have heard horror stories of companies being ripped off with their intellectual property in China. The anti-competitive, unfair playing field advantages that foreign companies get because their countries won't play by the rules. It goes on and on and on. We hold them accountable. We set the stage for America to be competitive. And you're going to see Made in America, not because a law or an elected official dictates that it's made in America. You're going to see Made in America because America is the place where we're going to build and grow things again. And it's going to be competitive. That's the Made in America that's going to be long term. Because if you put a barrier up, if you put a restriction on and say it's you know, a legislative fix to it, it's not going to be long term. Long term is making sure that we're here for generations to come, and that's dealing with our problems.
Hey Tom, could I just toss out that recently Japan lowered its corporate tax rate, which means now the United States has the highest corporate tax rate in the industrial world. And that's the basic thing that makes us uncompetitive.
Well, and we're the last world that still does it on a worldwide versus a territorial system. That's part of corporate reform that needs to be done. And individual reform is all part of it. I mean, it's just, we are shooting ourselves in the foot many times by the rules that we have coming out of Washington that put these guys on the field in an unfair way. And that's everyone. That's your tractor trailer haulers. That impacts us all. It's, you know, $4 a gallon for diesel. What'd you pay for diesel the other day?
I don't run the road anymore.
Okay.
I'm in a different department, so I
You
don't see it when I drive by, and it's 4 something.
Yeah, 418, I
It's
think it was
lots.
the other day. Yeah, wow. Compressed natural gas, we're getting some facilities that are coming up on compressed natural gas. We had a good hearing on that. We're piloting Travel America, are doing some non-tax subsidy deals, putting the fueling facilities in on their own initiative, because you're going from about $4.15, $4.50 a gallon diesel down to $2 a gallon diesel. That's a huge competitive advantage and a relief to American consumers, to all of us. That's a step in the right direction. But we have to do it. And one last point, you know, Mark Kritz is my co-founder of the Marcellus Shale Caucus, and he made a statement that has resonated with me from day one in our first hearing. And he said, you know, the days, he grew up in the southern part of Pennsylvania, the coal fields. And he said, that, you know, the days of the orange sky and the orange water are behind us. And we're not looking to go back to that. No one is. And I will tell you, I mean, I grew up, you know, the 70s, 80s, the whole environmental movement. I'm very sensitive to it. And what I think we're at now as a nation is it's good policy not to destroy our backyard, to not just dump it down the river and say, okay, now it's not my problem anymore. It's good, sound policy. It's become part of our culture. It's become part of our business models. And we're not looking to go back to orange skies, orange water. We're looking at doing it in a way that respects the environment, but at the same time, make sure that we're moving forward and put in a competitive position to not only create the jobs of today, but the jobs of tomorrow. That will do a lot. Anything else for the good of the order?
We do have to move along to Allegheny County. The rest is right about the right time.
Anyone else? Good of the order? Well, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate spending time with us. Read.house.gov is probably the best website to get a hold of us.